please, Jean.
Commissioners George Salgin, Deborah Van Essen, David Collins, Steve Stevenson, Jeff Vayu, Stephen Verber.
Now the meeting is open for public comment. Any item that is not on the agenda, the public is afforded the opportunity to address any matter not on the agenda. We've got 5 minutes. Would anybody like to address anything that's not on the agenda? Let's bring you right on up to the podium. If you could state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Mitchell Vinciguerra. I'm a field representative with the Northern California Carpenters Union. I'm based out of Local 152 in Manteca, but my area covers San Joaquin, Stanislaus, Merced, Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne counties. I'm here today to speak with you guys about Assembly Bill 2011, a state law that went into effect July 1st of this year. It will provide streamlined CEQA exempt review for certain affordable and mixed housing development projects. The bill can help generate more affordable homes quickly. It will provide living wage jobs for local residents, increase tax base, and help localities meet their arena numbers. To assist cities and counties, the NorCal Carpenters Union has created a template. It's an application for you guys to adopt. This application template covers all the requirements of AB 2011, which be complex, and it puts them into a straightforward checklist. That checklist has been reviewed and approved by our legal department for us to hand out to cities, counties, planning departments, members of the planning commissions, anybody who might be interested in it. So I'm more than willing to meet up with anybody who may be interested in receiving a copy of that. Just let me know. Also, Senate Bill 4 was recently passed by our governor. It has very similar language, but is more for institutions of higher education and religious institutions. So the colleges, the churches, they would be allowed to build housing on their lands without having to go through CEQA. It'll fast track it so we can get homes built. So once I have the application template for Senate Bill 4, I'll be more than willing to start handing those out too. So I'll leave my card and feel free to get a hold of me.
Excellent. And Mitchell, do you have any of the first handouts you were talking about?
No, but
Okay.
email me and I'll give it to you in digital copy.
Excellent. Any questions for Mitchell? Great job as a public speaker.
Thank you.
Mitchell.
Thank you.
Any other items for public comment? I see we have some students back here. Can I ask what class you guys are from? Perfect. Good to have you guys. Thanks for coming. Okay, let's look at the minutes from our previous meeting. Did everybody have an opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
Yes, I'll move to approve.
Second.
Did you vote, George?
I did.
Ah, there we go. Okay. Thank you. Passes 4 and 1 abstention. Okay, now we're going to be going into our meeting procedures. We are going to announce the item to be heard. City staff will present a report and recommendation. Then I will open up the public hearing and discussion. If you wish to testify, I would ask that you would wait for me to recognize you. I'll ask for people. Then wait to recognize you. We'll ask you to approach the podium, state your name and address, and then present your testimony. The order of testimony will be the applicant, those in favor, those in opposition, and rebuttal. After all the testimony has given, we'll be closing the public hearing discussion. So we'll want to hear everything that needs to be said up to that time. The Planning Commission may ask questions from you while you're up at the podium. Once we close the public hearing portion, the commission will further discuss the items. However, after all the testimony has been given, I'm going to close the public hearings and there will be no further opportunities to speak. The actions of the Planning Commission are final, but they may be appealed to the City Council. We'd ask if you would sign in. If you didn't on your way in, there should be a sign-up sheet on the back so that we've got a record of everybody here. And if you're in disagreement, you can appeal to the City Council. If you disagree with the decision of the Commission, you have the right of appeal. Only persons who participated in the review process by submitting written or oral testimony or by attending the public hearing may appeal. To preserve your appeals rights, be sure to print your name and address on the attendance sheet in the hall. Make your appeal with the Planning Department at City Hall, 259 Wilma Avenue during regular business hours. Staff will assist you. There is a fee for filing an appeal. All right, with that said, Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow commissioners. I'm not going to go through the staff reports in great detail. There's a staff report, some attachments, and also a correspondence from the applicant that you all should have gotten earlier today. The purpose for tonight's meeting is for a consistency finding for a proposed project seeking to locate in the core commercial district of the North Point specific plan. The specific plan was adopted in June of 2015 through a very public process. The inception of the plan involved city staff, the Ripon Planning Commission, the City Council, all the property owners in the North Point specific plan area, and the public at large. Included in the initial adoption of the specific plan was an EIR that studied impacts of the plan in its entirety based on the land uses that were identified in the plan. The intent of a specific plan is essentially in its title, specific in nature. Specific plans take a more in-depth view of a specific area of a general plan in order to allow greater detail and design for a specific area in a community. Specific plans most often entail stricter design concepts and ideas than are allowed within a general plan, and are most certainly have a more refined set of allowable uses within their districts than that of a general plan as well. So kind of a subset of what's allowed within a general plan. The North Point specific plan includes land use designations that describe typical uses for each district. It's not like the general plan that contains a lengthy chart of allowable uses for each district. Therefore, the specific plan requires interpretations of compatibility for each district in the plan from city staff. After looking over the applicant's initial submittal, city staff determined that the project is not consistent with the core commercial district of the North Point specific plan, and would therefore require the submittal of a specific plan amendment application, which can be processed concurrently with their project applications. The amendment process will look at the cause and effect of shifting or allowing certain uses in the North Point specific plan from one area to another, along with the environmental impacts of a hotel and banquet facility at this location, which was not previously considered in the initial environmental impact report for the North Point plan. Not only should all impacts of amending the plan be researched and studied, but public input and property owners within the plan area should be involved in any such amendment. Therefore, staff is asking the commission to agree with staff's recommended action on this matter, which was included in your staff report. I believe Mr. Terpstra has a little bit of additional information for you before we turn it back over to you.
Never let me loose with technology. It's not a good idea. In your capacities tonight as commissioners, you're going to be exercising the role of adjudicator, or in this case, you are making a decision on two or more positions that are placed before you. In this case, the applicant has his view of what the specific plan means. Staff has its own view of that. I would just remind and advise the commission tonight to listen carefully to the positions articulated by both parties. And to also remind the commission that you have considerable latitude as you apply what you read in the specific plan to the specific instances that are in front of you tonight. In other words, the position espoused by the applicant. The commission is entitled to, and the city as its parent agency has considerable latitude in making a decision tonight. Your decision would be upheld if it's supported by substantial evidence in the record. And it is certainly also consists of those things that are in the staff report and the specific plan itself. Specific plans in Ripon have a short history, but an important history, especially as we look over across where the North Point specific plan boundaries exist. Staff recognized and the council recognized that this was an important transitional area for the city as you transition from some very nice subdivisions and the like, and some agricultural parcels, and then out to the industrial area and the commercial area, the truck stops and the like. And so because of that, it was important to develop a planning tool that was clear, concise, and implementable. We know it has to be susceptible to being implemented in a successful way, given all factors that come touch and concern upon it. So in tonight's hearing, the issue is whether or not, as Ken indicated, the proposed project is consistent with or inconsistent with the land use designation that's applicable to it. If you have any questions in the course of the discussion and the testimony that's before you tonight, of me, I would advise and request that you would hold those until the public hearing is over and the public testimony has been given. And then we will address those issues, as well as any issues from my standpoint, from a legal standpoint, that affect the city and this application.
No, at this point, we'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman, and I guess you could open up the public comment time.
All right, we are now going to open it up. The order of testimony will first be the applicant. You could state your name and address, please.
Good evening, Chair Collins and members of the commission. My name is Brett Jolly. I'm land use counsel for the applicant Raj Dillon, who is here tonight with his partners. And my address is 3031 West March Lane, Suite 230 in Stockton. It's always a pleasure dealing with your city because your esteemed city attorney hired me right out of law school. So he can actually say he knew me when I was young and thin. And not a lot of people can say that anymore. But I always enjoy working with Mr. Terpstra. I appreciate the guidance that he has given you. I will clarify one point where we see things slightly differently in a moment. I do want to confirm we submitted a letter yesterday by email to the Planning Commission. I realize staff didn't get that till today. I just wanted to make sure that the commission has received that letter and has it. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, in summary, this is where I think we differ slightly. I think it's premature tonight for the commission to make a determination on consistency of a specific project with the plan. That's because we don't have any formal project application that's been put in. We put in a conceptual mixed-use development plan consisting of a restaurant, office space, hotel, and a banquet facility. But no specific project application is before the commission at this point. That would come later. That's when a project consistency determination would be made. Really, the question tonight is whether the proposed hotel and banquet facility uses are compatible with the North Point specific plan. We believe that they are, and let me walk you through that briefly why we think they are. The first point is that specific plan, as your planning director explained, It basically lies between the general plan and the zoning ordinance, and it's a specific planning document. It is a legislative document, like an ordinance or a general plan, that's adopted by the city council ultimately after hearing before the commission. So it's not zoning, but it works in conjunction with zoning. And in this case, the project site, or the property, excuse me, the Dillon property has a C2 zoning designation, but a core commercial specific plan designation. And any project's got to be consistent with both the zoning and the specific plan designations. With respect to uses at the site, uses are specifically called out in the C2 zoning, which is at table 16.20.1. The table identifies uses either as permitted by right, conditionally permitted, meaning an applicant needs to come before you to get the approval, or prohibited. Hotels and banquet facilities are expressly identified as conditionally permitted uses in the C2 zoning code. So it is consistent with the zoning, but would require an applicant to come before this commission to ultimately get the land use permits that are required to operate those types of uses in the C2 zone. Now, in contrast to the zoning ordinance, we have the specific plan, which is very flexible and very general on its discussion of land use restrictions. In each area of the plan, it identifies typical uses that may be developed in that area. It is not limiting. There's no prohibition. So the absence of listing a hotel or a banquet facility as a typical use in the core commercial area doesn't create an inconsistency by nature. The proposed uses that the applicant here has brought forward, the hotel and the banquet facility, actually do in a general implement and support the overall policies of the specific plan. The specific plan says the area development should act as a central gathering place for people to eat, shop, relax, and play, consistent with the intent of the plan. Now, if the Planning Commission were to hold that the absence of a specific use from the list of typical uses in any area in the specific plan means that use is entirely inconsistent at that location, locks the city into a very limited option for development, approving development, not only at this site, but other sites in the specific plan in the future. So that's why we need to return to the fact that while the specific plan is very general and flexible in its terms of proposed land uses, the zoning ordinance for C2, which also applies, specifically says hotels and banquet facilities are conditionally permitted uses in the C2 zone. So it's appropriate for the commission to determine that those uses are consistent with the specific plan. The other reason that we think it's appropriate for the commission to determine that this use is these uses are consistent is because of the client's due diligence process. In 2022, the client purchased the property, and the client has extensive experience in developing and managing hotels. They've built several from the ground up, including one is in process now of pulling permits over near the Flying J Travel Plaza, a couple blocks away from this site. They've also operated numerous, I believe I have a list of 17 that I'm not going to go through, hotels. Why would a knowledgeable developer of hotels buy the site without doing any due diligence or conferring with planning staff, you might ask? The answer is they did. While they were in escrow, Mr. Dillon met with the planning director and discussed the concept and uses proposed for the site. And as noted in the exhibit to my letter, the planning director responded, in theory, the city could support a nice hotel at that site, depending on the quality of a banquet facility and restaurant. And based on this, Mr. Dillon closed on the property with it to pursue his intent of putting a hotel at that site. But he did take reasonable steps to confirm that not only did the C2 zoning allow a hotel and banquet facilities, but met with staff, and staff said, in theory, we can support this. Now, this is not meant to throw your planning director under the bus. My client and I both have great respect for him. nor is this to suggest that the correspondence that my client received from the planning director established some sort of development permit or entitlement before coming to this commission with its use permits. But it's important to note that at no point during his discussions with the planning staff did planning staff advise my client that they believed that hotel and banquet facilities were inconsistent with the core commercial land use designation under the specific plan. That did not happen until after my client closed on the property and brought forth the conceptual development plans for the site, at which point the planning director said, unfortunately, the hotel and event center are not allowed in the core commercial district. It's not clear to us what changed between that initial meeting and the subsequent submission of those documents showing the conceptual plans. We understand that a hotel and banquet facility at the location may not be staff's preferred development of the property, but the uses themselves are not necessarily inconsistent with the specific plan. And issues that are raised in the staff report, like floor area coverage, parking, setbacks, and other specific design issues, as well as CEQA compliance, can and will be addressed when a formal project application is submitted and ultimately brought to this commission for approval. So if I may, why do a hotel here? Why not go where planning staff wants the hotel to go further north up Jacktone Road? Going further north up Jacktone Road is infeasible for this type of development that my client is proposing for a couple of reasons. First, my client's invested his capital into the current property for the specific purpose of developing a hotel and banquet facility, and he doesn't own other property up Jacktone Road where he could go do the same type of development on an alternative property. But even if he did own that property, the area is undesirable for his proposed use based on his experience as a hotel operator because it lacks freeway visibility that the current location he owns provides. And remember, not only is this a hotel at this facility, at this location, designed to serve Mislin Road visitors or Mislin Soccer Park visitors that come down. I remember when my son played travel soccer coming down. It's a very nice complex, but there is not a hotel at this point close by to serve that. But not only would it serve the people that are traveling for that purpose, but it's also going to capture people traveling through Ripon on Highway 99 looking for a nice and safe place to stay. And so this Hilton franchise would be there and it would have a visibility from the highway, allowing the city to further capture transit and occupancy tax that may get leaked to Manteca or to Stanislaus County. The other issue is there's a lack of significant infrastructure up there. That includes not only that the roads have not been widened and infrastructure has not necessarily been run all the way up to the northern area of the specific plan, but you don't have the development of uses around it that you do at the current location. You have a symbiotic use as you have the travel stop, Chevron, fast food, and other travel-oriented uses immediately across the street from this project site. So where do we go at this point? I don't think that the commission should necessarily take either of the options that have been presented in the staff report. One option is to agree with staff that the project is inconsistent with the specific plan, and the other option is to determine that the project is consistent with the specific plan. Again, I think it's premature for the commission to make any determination on a project because we don't have a project ready to go and be reviewed by you. We have a conceptual application in that needs further refining and design. We'd like the opportunity to do that with staff. But if my client is forced to go through a specific plan amendment, that's a major undertaking. It is not just coming to this commission for a permit with conditions and review after a public hearing, but it is a legislative enactment which requires not only this commission, but action by the city council to adopt that legislative document. It is also a huge administrative undertaking, and planning staff has advised my client that it would likely cost several $100,000 to go through that process in administrative and consultant fees to amend the specific plan to more expressly allow hotels and banquet facilities on my client's property. Again, we think that's unnecessary because we think the zoning ordinance, general plan do expressly allow this. The specific plan does not prohibit it, so there's not an inconsistency there. But rather than make any specific project consistency finding tonight, we'd like to push for the collaborative approach. And at page 2 of my letter, we have some proposed motion language. We would ask that the commission find that the hotel and banquet facility, restaurant and office uses, not a specific project, but the uses proposed for development at the applicant's property are generally consistent with the North Point specific plan. And we're more than willing to say that should be qualified to note the finding does not grant any development approvals, and the applicant will still be required to submit all necessary project application materials and fees, satisfy any further environmental review required by CEQA, and ensure any development project processed for approval be consistent with the general plan, the specific plan, and the Ripon Municipal Code. So we're not asking for any entitlement tonight, but at most we would ask that the commission determine that the proposed hotel and banquet facility uses are not incompatible with that specific plan, that they are consistent with and in conformity with the specific plan for the reasons we've discussed. Thank you for allowing me some time to go over on that, Chair Collins. I'm happy to try to answer any questions from the commission.
Thank you, Brett. Questions for Mr. Jolly?
Sure. Go ahead. After you, please.
I just have one question. If I heard you correctly, I'm assuming that the applicant did have a copy of our North Point specific plan before they made any decisions on purchasing the land.
I believe it's in the public record, it's in the public sector, so I don't, whether they physically have the copy or not, I can see that that is out there and they were aware of this specific plan.
Access to it. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Deb, the staff report says that on 2022, that staff gave a copy of the plan and informed the applicant that it was within the boundaries of the North Point specific plan. Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
So that being the case, I look at some of the wording and what's been discussed about this being a traditional downtown or village feel comfortable for pedestrian and a friendly atmosphere characterized by small scale retail service, eating, drinking establishments along the street. I don't see where this fits. And as you look at the dozens or hundreds of people that were involved in developing this specific plan, the cost that was borne to do that, I don't think I could find a single person that would say, here's what we had in mind, but let's put a banquet center there, and thinking that those two line up in some way. So I kind of have a little bit of a hard time with that thinking. And I guess if we were going to amend that, to do that in a format that is, as you mentioned, collaborative between you guys and us, and Ken and the department, doesn't give to me that feel of transparency that was offered when the specific plan was developed. So I would feel like we're kind of backrooming this kind of thing to develop something that doesn't fit, I think, what everybody kind of had in mind from the beginning. So I guess my question then from all of that would be to say that we have a method. It's outlined, the 3 steps that you guys would take to try to make it work, for it to be public and transparent. And believe me, I'm grateful that you guys are wanting to develop in Ripon, that you're already developing elsewhere. I love that. But, we need to also represent the public and make sure that that this is all transparent to them, I guess is what I'm saying. So why would you want us to short circuit that process and be less transparent and not have the public hearings when that's what's already kind of prescribed. And there is a method, not like we're inventing something new. There is a process to make this happen. That's my question to you.
Sure,
Thank you.
it's a relevant question. And my response to you is, we're not looking to short circuit the process or preclude public hearings. Obviously, tonight, we're having a public hearing that was duly noticed on this. We may have speakers that speak in opposition or raise issues, we may not. But even after that, again, we are not asking for a project to be deemed consistent that would prevent it from coming to this commission in the future. Instead, this commission would review any use permit application, at which point the commission has to make consistency findings as a matter of law. And that would be after a public hearing. And anybody that disagreed with those findings would have a right of appeal. But based on the flexibility of language in the specific plan and the broad discretion that this commission has in interpreting consistency, as your city attorney explained, I believe that there is substantial evidence to support a finding that a hotel and a banquet facility are not inconsistent with the specific plan as it's been adopted. And it is appropriate, and it fulfills many of the objectives and goals and policies of the site, of the specific plan as it relates to that planning area. And again, we understand this might not be the exact type of development that staff or the commission envisioned when adopting the specific plan, but to me, there is not an actual inconsistency there between what has been adopted and what is being proposed, particularly when we go again and look at the general plan and the zoning, which say that these are conditionally permitted uses at that location.
I think
Thank you.
that there's a lot obviously involved in this. You caught yourself when you said on that site. Yes, the specific plan does have these kinds of uses in general in the plan. I don't see it in the same light that you do. You're calling it more general and less specific. I call it a specific plan, that we listed the kind of things that we wanted in those areas. So I don't see it in the same light. I see it as more specific, not less specific. And secondly, I remember going to a basketball shooting clinic one time, and the gentleman that was leading the clinic was having guys shoot jump shots from outside the key, and he was saying, shoot your shot, go get your ball, get back in line. Don't go get the ball, shoot a layup, because you're going to affect the next guy behind you as he's taking his shot. His double negative was, you are never not impacting someone else. You are impacting someone else if we would put this in this spot. Because as you talked about, over by Missland, we have areas that we have identified for these kinds of uses. We put something in the current location, and now we've got an issue with, are we going to really attract somebody else for over there? So these are things I just want to keep in mind as we're considering this. I think your answer is well-founded. I just happen to take a little bit different view of specific versus the general plan.
Thank you, George. Steve.
Jeff.
Jeff, sorry.
I do have a question, actually. I have several, but George asked one of them, so that takes it down a little bit. Your client is obviously a sophisticated developer, investor in property, and I echo the same thing George says about investing in Ripon. Greatly appreciate that, and it's a beautiful project on its surface. When you look at the plans, it's very well thought out. The question that I have is: has your client purchased property prior to City Council or Planning Commission approval in the past?
Have they bought, you're asking, have they closed on a parcel before they had all development entitlements? I don't know the answer to that question. I can tell you it is very common for developers to do that, particularly where an entitlement process, as you know, can take sometimes 2 or more years. And oftentimes property sellers don't want to wait that long. So they condition the sale of property, the developer conditions his purchase of the property on a due diligence period and satisfying some satisfaction that the developer will be able to ultimately develop the property rather than just going in blind. And here, that's what my client, as a sophisticated developer, attempted to do by looking at the zoning ordinance, understanding that the uses proposed are conditionally permitted, and then going further to meet with planning staff to discuss the concepts and get feedback on those concepts. And none of that feedback was, this is obviously inconsistent with the specific plan. So to the extent that's the conclusion now, it was obviously not something that was so apparent that it was brought up when my client was doing his due diligence. And I think that supports the idea that there is a lot of flexibility on that site under the specific plan.
Thank you, Mr. Jolly. Appreciate that answer. And to expand on that a little bit, the question of in theory requires me to ask the question, if it's in theory, then why close on a property within 60 days of meeting with staff and our director? And in that process, was there a phase 1 or phase 2 done on the environmental side of it, given that property is located adjacent to an existing diesel repair shop that's been there for decades?
I was not involved in the client's purchase and activities on the property at that time, so I do not know, aside from their meetings with planning staff on the land use issues, I don't know what other due diligence was undertaken for that site. I've only been involved for a couple of months on this, so I'm sorry, I don't have an answer to that question.
Would your client be willing to answer any of those questions that I?
Um, Yeah, and I think that they probably can. What specifically are you trying to understand, just so I can understand what we are looking for?
Property purchased as speculation, or was it purchased with the intent of knowing that they were going to get it through the planning commission and the city council?
It was I can answer that
Okay.
question. It was purchased with the intent to develop a mixed-use project with a restaurant, office, hotel, and banquet facility on it. Not necessarily in the exact form that has been presented in the conceptual plan that came to staff, but that's kind of that's the first draft, right? That's the starting point. And so the due diligence in meeting with planning staff on this, and I do this for clients from time to time, where they've got to close on a project or on a property long before they can get through an entitlement process. So you've got to go meet with those who are in charge, do your research under the planning and zoning documents, understand realistically if there are major impediments to going forward with what you are purchasing that property to do. That's what my client did. And I understand that there was qualifying language in that email that says, in theory, we can support this. But nothing in that email says, this is inconsistent with the land use designation in the specific plan. In theory, obviously meaning we've got to come back to the planning commission for approval of use permits. We understand that. So you're not going to have approvals. You're not going to have staff saying, yes, you can build this tomorrow, or even making promises of what the commission's going to do. And your planning director did not do that at all. But I do feel like, to the extent that the determination now from staff that this is inherently inconsistent with the specific plan because hotels and banquet facilities are not allowed there. The fact that that didn't come up at all during the discussions suggests that it is not entirely clear that that is prohibited or inconsistent with a specific plan.
If I could indulge the group. Just getting down to more of the in the weeds, if you will, literally. Understanding that maybe a phase 1 or phase 2 was completed, I would expect that that would be the case. Although closing in 60 days maybe would not allow for that, and I'm just surprised that that wouldn't be done on bare land development. So on a greenfield. So in saying that, looking at the actual project as it's proposed, um, does it meet the requirement for parking? And does it meet the requirement for shading, the 40% shading that's in the specific plan?
And this is a good question because this has come up in the discussions. And the answer is, I don't know because this is a conceptual plan. Uh, Again, all of those design elements, sizing, scoping, parking would be finalized in a formal application before coming to this commission. So there's no request to vary from any of those standards. To the extent the conceptual plan, according to staff, exceeds the floor area ratio, doesn't provide sufficient parking as it's been proposed, may not have sufficient setbacks. My client understands that whatever site-specific site plan for the use permit would come to this commission ultimately needs to make sure that it is consistent with all of those standards, those objective standards.
I'd like to just step in here and remind my fellow commissioners that those kind of questions are not what we're here to discuss tonight, right? We're not here to discuss the plan and whether or not there's enough parking and all of that, because we don't have a plan. We're here to discuss whether or not this meets the North Point specific plan to allow those. Yeah, that's what we're here for tonight.
Right,
Just
and-
a reminder.
No, I appreciate that.
Jeff. Just back from vacation. Yeah, sorry. Steve just whacked me if I do that again. Jeff, any further questions? Steve?
I do not have any questions.
Okay. Deborah?
I already asked my question.
Perfect. Anybody else? Brett, thank you so much.
Thank
I
you
know it
for
was
your
a
time.
difficult issue, and I know you did a good job explaining very concisely the
Thank you.
thoughts. So I appreciate it. Okay, this is an opportunity for anybody in favor of this project who would like to approach the podium and to speak. Is there anybody who would like to speak in favor of this project? Okay, is there anybody that would like to speak in opposition to this project? Okay, please up to the podium and state your name and address, please.
Good evening, Chair Collins. My name is Michael Muska, 20-year resident of Ripon. So in general, I'm concerned about the number of hotels either in development or being proposed for a city of 15,000. By my count, there's 3, maybe 4. And I'm also concerned about the number of gas stations being proposed in the city, which will be, by my count, 7 or 8. So for a city of 15,000, that concerns me. But specifically to this project, I would just ask that the letter that was provided to the commission by the gentleman who spoke before me be provided to the public this evening, or if not this evening, then tomorrow for review by the public.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Michael. Is there a rebuttal?
No rebuttal.
Perfect. Okay. So all of the testimony has been given. I'm going to close the public hearing and the commission will go to discussion. So at this point, all of the discussion from people in the audience is going to be completed. So let's go ahead and move now into the commission discussion. And if you have questions of Tom or Ken, this would be the appropriate time to bring them up.
First of all, I appreciate all of the information from city staff and also from Mr. Jolly. That I found your letter very interesting and appreciate all the points that you brought out. In 2015, I was on the planning commission, as was George and Dave. And that's when we did the North Point specific plan. And it was a long process. We spent a lot of time with community people in general meetings and meeting with the staff and paid for an expert person to help us make the North Point specific plan. And I think we did it with our view of what we want Ripon to be and continue to be. You know, I've lived here 69 years now. So Ripon's a pretty special place. And that was why we did the North Point specific plan, is to keep it a really special town. So first of all, going into that plan and the work that was done with that. So to say, okay, well, you know, we're going to kind of accept it, but maybe we're just going to change a few things here and there and tweak a few things here and there. We're going to interpret it differently. I have a problem with that. I will say that first of all. On pages 28 and 29 of the specific plan talks about core commercial, which is where this is. There is no mention of putting a motel or a banquet facility there. So I would say that the staff's recommendation that that is not consistent with the specific plan is probably true. And I know Mr. Jolly talked about the infrastructure being there already. However, I take that route every day on my way to my office in Manteca because I won't go on 99 anymore. The infrastructure there is not there. Traffic would be a horrendous issue if we had a banquet facility there, but that's for future if it gets to that point. So I would have to say that I can agree there's times and reason for exceptions. I don't see that in this case. I feel like I would tend to stick with what the specific plan says and support what the specific plan says. Like I said, Ripon's a highly desirable community. It's sought after, and I think it's because of our careful planning, well thought out land use, and using experts that are there and professionals to help us continue to have Ripon be a good community. So I'm definitely leaning towards supporting the specific plan as it states. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
I'm one of the newer commissioners and this specific plan, you know, predates me. And I hear a lot of time and effort that was put into developing the specific plan. And I'm still learning. And with all due respect to my predecessors that put in the work, I do believe that the effort and the research and the time was put in to develop this plan. And I'm leaning with the city staff on this.
Thank you.
I also agree with you on that question, and that's why I wanted to make sure that I asked questions that were relevant to the specific plan and the project that's presented, understanding that you're asking us to kind of step back a little bit. So I appreciate your conversation, your honesty, transparency, and yes, I also agree that the specific plan, while I was not a part of that, I've read through it a couple of different times, and it's a very well thought out. It's a very specific in its name in terms of what the hope and goal is of that area. And I tend to agree with my fellow commissioners that I would adopt the specific plan over any changes to it.
And Jeff, I would go along with what you said. I was at the very tail end of the specific plan development and did have a good understanding of all the effort that went into putting that together. And I just, as I said earlier, as I think of what the intent for that area is, this is far outside the bounds of what I would have anticipated for the area. And I drive by it nearly every day. And I do think there's some things that need to be considered that when it comes to sticking with the plan that we have. I feel like this would kind of take us a little far afield from that, to be honest with you. So I would tend to agree with the staff recommendation and would be in a position to make a motion unless somebody else is wanting to discuss it.
Anybody have any further discussion? So there are three options in front of us. We can look at the two provided by staff or the alternate provided by Mr. Jolly. Any discussion on that? Okay, if there is no discussion, then I think we're open for a motion.
I would thank everybody involved. Mr. Jolly, you did a fantastic job representing your client. Nonetheless, I would make the recommendation that we agree with the director's interpretation that the proposal is not consistent with the land use designation on the subject property within the adopted North Point specific plan. Therefore, the following application sequence will be necessary in order to process the applicant developer's proposed project, listed as 1, 2, and 3, I believe.
Thank you, George. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second. Thank you. Okay, it looks like the motion has passed by a vote of 5-0. Thank you for bringing this difficult and complex situation to us. It is our core area. And I know this may be disappointed, but it's a valuable piece of land in a wonderful city. We're looking forward to development being done there that's vibrant, that brings the community in. I would like to thank everybody who spoke on this project. All right, we're going to continue now with city reports, I believe.
Yeah, I don't have anything really further to report to the commission tonight. We don't have anything scheduled for the January meeting at this point. So possibly February, we would have a meeting, which would be on a Tuesday night because it's that would be a President's Week and holiday. So nothing further to report on that. Just wishing you all happy holidays.
Thank you. Commissioners, any reports? Okay.
I'd echo that with the happy holidays, Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas to all. And thank you, Rip and Christian, for coming out tonight.
Thank you, ladies. Great to see you. And gentlemen.
Meeting's closed.